saying that objection is only reasonable if it's within business hours. So, Sir, I think there are some very sensible changes made by Select Committee, Sir, and we're certainly supportive of the bill. Thank you.
Gareth Hughes.
Kia ora, Mr Chair. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou kia ora. Look, it's 2017. I don't need to tell the House how important this year is, but I think it's important to stop and reflect that it was only 10 years ago, in 2007, that we really saw the transformational power of technology, which is what we're dealing with this legislation. It was only 10 years ago that the iPhone was launched, 10 years ago that Airbnb was conceived, 10 years ago that Twitter was spun off, 10 years ago that IBM started work on its Watson supercomputer, and 10 years ago that Facebook opened up. It's incredible to stop and think how much change we've seen from all those different devices and technologies in the last 10 years. The problem this bill is dealing with is how do we empower and unleash the empowering technology to help New Zealanders, New Zealand businesses, New Zealand communities. Because we've seen how the world has changed, how New Zealand has changed, but too much of New Zealand is stuck in the past with old-fashioned, slow copper lines. This legislation was trying to deal with two problems. The first is that the government's spending an awful lot of money on ultra-fast broadband, something all parties in Parliament supports. We want to see more New Zealanders connected, taking up the opportunities of fibre to work at home, to upload, to create. But under some problems with the provisions relating to third-party access to shared driveways or apartments, for example, we know that maybe 44,000 installs could have failed as of the result of needing a complex negotiation through an apartment or the ability of neighbours to block access to a driveway so someone could install fibre. This was something identified many years ago by both the Labour and Green parties, and it's good we're finally, many years on, seeing action. But I want to talk about another problem, which was that we've got tens of thousands of kilometres wires providing electricity to all corners of the country, a great transmission method to get internet, high-quality internet, to people no matter where they live in the country. This was an area which wasn't in the original bill, but the committee was able to come together, and I want to acknowledge the Chair, Melissa Lee, and the other members of the committee, because the committee was able to come together to come up with an innovative solution to deal with that problem. So the original legislation was dealing with the access issues. The second part of the solution was the committee came together to find a solution to allow electricity distributors, lines companies, to string fibre up on their existing works. Now, what this means is for a farmer who's out in rural New Zealand who's got electricity access, they can now, through their lines company, see internet access on that same pole. Now, the committee grappled with some of the tricky issues in terms of land access, in terms of who's got the contractual obligations, who's got the communication responsibilities with that landowner. An area I was particularly thought was important and working on was Section 155ZSF, which was what happens if you do have a lines company, and of course we've got 29 regional electricity distribution monopolies across New Zealand. What if one of them said, look, our core business is electricity provision, we're not particularly fussed about internet provision. Now, the catalyst for getting this pioneering subpart 4 through this legislation was North Power, who I really want to acknowledge and thank for their excellent work and submissions. But what about the other 28, if they choose not to? Now, a compromise reached on the committee was that we've delegated those powers to the Minister through Order in Council to make a regulation. I would have preferred a more positive, empowering obligation in this primary legislation so that third parties, an ISP, for example, or a regional fibre provider, could go to a lines company and say, look, you've got thousands of customers out there. They don't have high-quality internet access at the moment. We would like to use your electricity lines to make it possible, given you are a regional monopoly with public benefit. However, we didn't see consensus on that point in the committee, so it is good that we at least have a regulation-making power for the Minister. So, Mr Chair, just to summarise, we've seen a very clear problem in terms of the slowness and the inability for Kiwis to access high-quality internet. We've seen two solutions, one from the government, which all parties support, one from the committee, probably the most inspirational select committee process that I've experienced in my 7 years in Parliament, a committee coming together to work on shared solutions, and then this vision for New Zealand that we could see more in this country connected, taking up the opportunities of the internet.
Mr. Wall.
Tēnā koe, Mr Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to